I'm getting breaking news. The royals have admitted this photo has been edited. They're saying, quote, on behalf of the entire royal family, this is Kate's fault. That was really insensitive of her, guys.
Kate Middleton disappeared after surgery. Palace caught in massive lie. International news agencies expose fake photos that will destroy the royal family forever. You won't believe what they're hiding about the future queen. This scandal changes everything. The story begins with Catherine, Princess of Wales, commonly known as Kate Middleton, who underwent what Kensington Palace described as planned abdominal surgery in mid-January 2024.
It's incredible how strong and how you've been able to cope, really. And I put that down to your really early years, childhood experience, but also the relationship that you've got. You're amazingly close.
Yeah.
And yes, you know. No, but and some families sadly aren't.
The palace announced that the surgery was successful, but provided no details about the specific nature of the medical procedure. This initial lack of information, while not entirely unusual for royal medical matters, would later become the foundation for widespread public curiosity and concern. Following her surgery, Kate Middleton effectively disappeared from public view. For weeks, there were no official royal engagements, no public appearances, and no updated photographs released by the palace. This absence became increasingly noticeable as the weeks stretched on, particularly given that Kate had maintained a relatively active public schedule prior to her medical procedure. The royal calendar, typically filled with ceremonial duties, charity visits, and state functions, remained conspicuously empty of any events featuring the Princess of Wales. The silence from Kensington Palace only served to fuel speculation across traditional media outlets and social media platforms. Royal watchers, journalists, and members of the public began questioning where Kate was and how she was recovering. The lack of any visual confirmation of her well-being created an information vacuum that conspiracy theories and rumors quickly filled. The situation took an interesting turn when paparazzi photographs allegedly showing Kate Middleton surfaced in early March. These images, which appeared to show the princess in a car, were published by American celebrity news outlet TMZ. However, even these photographs became subjects of intense scrutiny and debate. Social media users and photo analysis experts began questioning the authenticity of the images, pointing to what they claimed were inconsistencies in lighting, image quality, and even facial features. Some suggested that the person in the photographs might not actually be Kate Middleton at all. The controversy surrounding these paparazzi shots highlighted a significant difference between British and American media approaches to royal coverage. While TMZ and other American outlets published the images, major British publications largely refrained from doing so, citing respect for royal privacy. This restraint reflected the complex relationship between the British press and the royal family, which has been shaped by decades of controversy, including the intense media scrutiny that preceded Princess Diana's death in 1997. As speculation continued to mount and social media discussions about Kate's whereabouts intensified, Kensington Palace faced increasing pressure to provide some form of public reassurance about the princess's condition. The palace's traditional approach of maintaining privacy around royal medical matters was clashing with the modern reality of 24-hour news cycles and instant global communication through social media platforms. The pressure reached a crescendo in mid-March, coinciding with Mother's Day celebrations in the United Kingdom. It was at this point that Kensington Palace made the decision to release what they hoped would be a definitive response to the growing speculation. The palace published an official photograph showing Kate Middleton seated alongside her 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. The image appeared warm and natural, showing a smiling Kate in casual clothing surrounded by her children in what looked like a comfortable family setting. The photograph was distributed through official royal channels and was intended to serve multiple purposes. Primarily, it was meant to provide visual proof that Kate was healthy and recovering well from her surgery. Additionally, the timing of the release, on Mother's Day, was clearly designed to present a positive family image and to suggest that Kate was well enough to spend quality time with her children. The palace likely hoped that this single image would put an end to the weeks of speculation and allow Kate to continue her recovery in private. However, the photograph had the opposite effect of what was intended. Rather than calming public concern, it ignited an even more intense controversy that would ultimately involve major international news agencies and raise serious questions about image manipulation and media ethics. Within hours of the photograph's release, social media users began pointing out what they claimed were obvious signs of digital manipulation. Photography experts and amateur analysts alike began dissecting the image pixel by pixel, identifying what appeared to be clear evidence of photo editing. The scrutiny was unlike anything typically applied to royal photographs, reflecting both the heightened public interest in Kate's situation and the increasingly sophisticated ability of ordinary people to analyze digital images. The concerns raised by these online investigators were not minor technical issues, but appeared to be significant editing errors that suggested extensive manipulation of the original photograph. Users pointed to inconsistencies in lighting, unusual blending around certain areas of the image, and what appeared to be anatomical impossibilities in hand positioning. The level of editing detected was far beyond what might be expected from routine touch-ups or color correction. As the criticism mounted online, professional news organizations began taking notice. The controversy escalated dramatically when major international picture agencies began issuing what are known as kill notices for the photograph. These notices, sent to newspapers, websites, and other media outlets that had already published the image, instructed them to stop using the photograph immediately due to concerns about its authenticity. The agencies involved were not minor players in the media landscape, but included some of the most respected and established news organizations in the world. The Associated Press, Agence France Presse, and Reuters all issued kill notices for the image, citing evidence that it had been manipulated in ways that violated their editorial standards. For news agencies of this caliber, to take such dramatic action against an official royal photograph was virtually unprecedented and signaled that the concerns about image manipulation were being taken very seriously by professional media organizations. This development transformed what had begun as social media speculation into a full-blown international news story. The fact that major news agencies were refusing to distribute an official royal photograph raised fundamental questions about trust, transparency, and the use of digital manipulation in official communications from one of the world's most high-profile public institutions. The response from major international news agencies sent shockwaves through the media landscape and prompted an immediate and intense examination of the photograph that Kensington Palace had hoped would end speculation about Kate Middleton's well-being. What followed was a detailed forensic analysis by photography experts, digital imaging specialists, and countless members of the public who began scrutinizing every pixel of the image with unprecedented intensity. The specific technical problems identified in the photograph were numerous and, according to experts, indicated a level of manipulation that went far beyond standard photo editing practices typically employed in official royal photography. Professional photographers and digital imaging experts who analyzed the image pointed to several glaring inconsistencies that suggested multiple photographs had been combined or that significant alterations had been made to the original image. One of the most obvious problems identified was located in the background of the photograph, specifically in a mirror or reflective surface that appeared behind one of Kate's children. Photography experts noted that the reflection in this surface did not match what should logically appear based on the positioning of the subjects in the foreground. The reflection appeared to show elements that were inconsistent with the main image, suggesting that different photographs had been merged together, or that significant digital manipulation had occurred in post-production. Professional photographers explained that reflections are among the most difficult elements to manipulate convincingly in composite photography, as they must accurately represent the spatial relationships and lighting conditions of the scene. Another major issue involved the clothing worn by the subjects in the photograph. Digital imaging experts identified serious problems with pattern matching and texture blending, particularly around a red sweater worn by one of the children. The pattern on the garment appeared to have been digitally altered or reconstructed in a way that created unnatural continuity between different sections of the fabric. Professional retouchers explained that this type of error typically occurs when portions of an image are copied and pasted from one area to another, or when multiple images are blended together without proper attention to maintaining consistent textures and patterns. The repetitive nature of certain pattern elements suggested that cloning tools had been used to extend or modify the garment's appearance. Perhaps most notably, there were significant anatomical impossibilities identified in the hand positioning of the subjects. Photography experts pointed to what appeared to be a crossed finger that defied normal human anatomy, suggesting that hands from different photographs had been combined, or that digital manipulation had created physically impossible positioning. This type of error is particularly telling because it indicates not just minor touch-ups, but substantial reconstruction of key elements within the image. Anatomical inconsistencies are often considered among the most serious errors in photo manipulation because they suggest that the editor either lacked sufficient skill or was working under time pressure that prevented careful attention to detail. The technical analysis revealed what experts described as clear evidence of composite photography, where multiple images are combined to create a single final photograph. While this technique is not uncommon in professional photography and can be used for legitimate purposes, such as ensuring everyone in a group photo has their eyes open or is looking in the right direction, the execution in this case appeared to have been carried out with a level of carelessness that professional photographers found shocking. The composite work showed evidence of what experts termed layering errors, where different elements of the image had been improperly merged, creating visible seams and inconsistencies. Color grading inconsistencies were also identified throughout the image, with different areas showing variations in lighting, saturation, and tone that suggested they had been photographed under different conditions or at different times. Professional colorists noted that the shadows, highlights, and overall exposure appeared inconsistent across different areas of the photograph, which would be highly unusual in a single, unmanipulated image taken under controlled conditions. The color temperature variations suggested that some elements of the image may have been captured under different lighting conditions, possibly even on different days. The metadata analysis of the digital file also raised questions among technical experts. Digital photographs contain embedded information about camera settings, editing software used, and modification history. While the full details of this metadata were not made public, photography experts suggested that the file showed evidence of extensive processing through multiple software applications, indicating a complex editing workflow that went well beyond standard photo correction procedures. The metadata trail suggested that the image had been opened, modified, and saved multiple times, which is consistent with extensive manipulation work. Professional photo editors also noted problems with shadow consistency throughout the image. In authentic photographs, shadows follow predictable patterns based on the lighting setup used during the shoot. However, the shadows in the Mother's Day photograph appeared to fall in different directions and with varying intensities, suggesting that elements from multiple photographs taken under different lighting conditions had been combined. This type of error is particularly revealing because shadows are often overlooked by amateur editors, but are immediately obvious to professionals. Edge detection analysis, a technique used by forensic photo experts, revealed additional problems with the way different elements of the image had been cut out and combined. The edges around certain subjects showed telltale signs of manual selection and masking, with slight halos and inconsistent sharpness that indicated imprecise composite work. Professional retouchers noted that these edge artifacts were consistent with someone using selection tools without sufficient precision or experience. As the technical criticism mounted and major news agencies continued to refuse distribution of the image, pressure grew on Kensington Palace to provide some form of explanation or response. The situation was unprecedented in modern royal communications, as official royal photographs are typically accepted without question by media outlets and are rarely subjected to this level of forensic scrutiny. The palace's initial response was silence, which only served to intensify speculation and criticism. For several hours after the kill notices were issued, there was no official comment from royal representatives, leaving media outlets and the public to speculate about what had gone wrong and who was responsible for the apparent manipulation. This silence was particularly notable given the palace's usual efficiency in managing media relations and damage control. When a response finally came, it took the form of a personal statement attributed directly to Kate Middleton herself, rather than an official palace communication. This choice was significant, as it represented an unusual departure from typical royal communications protocol, where statements are normally issued by palace representatives, rather than members of the royal family speaking directly to controversial issues. Kate's statement was brief and personal in tone. She acknowledged that she had been involved in editing the photograph and described herself as an amateur photographer who occasionally experiments with editing techniques. The statement included an apology for any confusion the photograph had caused and expressed hope that families had enjoyed Mother's Day celebrations. Notably, the statement was signed simply C for Catherine, lending it a more personal and informal character than typical royal communications. The phrasing of the statement was carefully analyzed by media experts and royal watchers. By describing herself as an amateur photographer, Kate appeared to be taking personal responsibility for the technical problems with the image, while also suggesting that the errors were the result of inexperience rather than deliberate deception. The word experiment was also significant, as it implied that the editing was exploratory in nature rather than an attempt to mislead. However, the statement also raised as many questions as it answered. Critics pointed out that if Kate had indeed been responsible for the editing errors, it seemed unlikely that such extensive manipulation would have been carried out by someone without professional training. The level of composite work evident in the image suggested familiarity with advanced photo editing techniques that would be unusual for someone describing themselves as an amateur. The timing of Kate's statement was also noteworthy. It was released on what was Mother's Day in the United Kingdom, though the statement acknowledged that different countries celebrate Mother's Day on different dates. This detail was included presumably to explain why the photograph had been released on that particular day, though it also highlighted the international nature of the controversy and the global attention the image had received. Despite Kate's apology, the statement failed to address many of the specific technical questions that had been raised about the photograph, leaving the public with more questions than answers. Kate Middleton's brief apology statement, while clearly intended to put an end to the growing controversy, instead opened the floodgates to an even more intense wave of public scrutiny and criticism. The statement's failure to address the specific technical concerns raised by photography experts, combined with its refusal to provide the unedited version of the photograph that many were demanding, only served to deepen the mystery surrounding the Princess of Wales and her current condition. The public reaction to Kate's statement was swift and largely skeptical. Social media platforms erupted with criticism from users who pointed out that if the editing had been as innocent as Kate claimed, there should be no problem releasing the original unmanipulated photograph. This logic seems straightforward to many observers. If the goal was truly to reassure the public about Kate's well-being, then showing an authentic image would be the most effective way to achieve that objective. The continued refusal to do so only fueled further speculation about what the palace might be trying to hide. The controversy also highlighted broader questions about the royal family's relationship with transparency and public accountability. Critics began pointing out what they saw as a pattern of secrecy and evasiveness that extended beyond just this single photograph incident. The timing was particularly unfortunate for the palace, as King Charles had recently announced his cancer diagnosis, while providing virtually no details about the type of cancer, his prognosis, or the specific treatments he was receiving. This parallel situation with King Charles became a focal point for critics, who argued that the royal family was being unnecessarily secretive about basic health information that the public had a legitimate interest in knowing. The argument put forward by many commentators was that as publicly funded figures who serve as heads of state and national representatives, senior members of the royal family should be more transparent about significant health issues that might affect their ability to carry out their official duties. The criticism extended to fundamental questions about the role and relevance of monarchy in the modern era. Commentators across various media platforms began questioning why an institution that relies heavily on public funding and derives its legitimacy from serving as national figureheads should be afforded the same privacy rights as ordinary private citizens. The argument was that members of the royal family, particularly senior working royals like Kate and Charles, had essentially traded certain privacy rights for their positions of privilege and public support. The financial aspect of this criticism was particularly pointed. Royal finances are complex, involving a mixture of private wealth, traditional crown estate revenues, and direct parliamentary funding through the sovereign grant. However, critics argued that regardless of the specific financial mechanisms involved, the royal family's lifestyle and activities are ultimately supported by British taxpayers, which creates an obligation for greater transparency than they were currently providing. The secretiveness surrounding both Kate's surgery and King Charles's cancer diagnosis was seen by many as emblematic of an outdated approach to royal communications that failed to recognize the realities of modern media and public expectations. In an era where even minor celebrities routinely share detailed personal information with their followers, the contrast with royal communication practices seemed increasingly stark and anachronistic. The situation was further complicated by additional suspicious circumstances that began emerging around the same time as the photograph controversy. Prince William, Kate's husband and the heir to the throne, had unexpectedly canceled a planned engagement at the last minute without providing any explanation for his absence. This cancellation, which occurred around the time the photograph was released, struck many observers as highly unusual, given the typically rigid and carefully planned nature of royal schedules. Royal engagements are typically planned months in advance and are rarely canceled without significant reason. When cancellations do occur, they are usually accompanied by some form of explanation, even if it is vague or diplomatic. The fact that William's cancellation came with no explanation whatsoever, combined with the ongoing speculation about Kate's condition, created an impression that there might be more serious issues within the royal household than were being publicly acknowledged. The mysterious nature of Kate's original surgery continued to be a source of speculation and concern. The palace's description of the procedure as planned abdominal surgery was seen by many as deliberately vague and uninformative. Medical experts and commentators noted that this level of secrecy was unusual even by royal standards, particularly given that the surgery was described as planned rather than emergency treatment, which would typically make it less sensitive from a security or privacy perspective. The extended nature of Kate's absence from public duties also raised questions about the severity of whatever medical issue she had faced. Royal schedules are typically planned far in advance, and the complete absence of any future engagements involving Kate suggested either a more serious medical situation than had been publicly acknowledged, or a deliberate decision to keep her completely out of the public eye, for reasons that remained unclear. Royal watchers and historians began comparing the current situation to previous royal health crises, and noted that the level of secrecy was unusual even by historical standards. While the royal family has always maintained some privacy around medical matters, the complete information blackout regarding both Kate's surgery and King Charles's cancer was seen as going beyond normal practice. The role of Kate's background and preparation for royal life became another point of discussion during this period. Unlike some previous royal wives who had been thrust into the spotlight with little preparation, Kate had been in a relationship with Prince William for many years before their marriage, during which time she had experienced extensive media attention and scrutiny. This long courtship period meant that Kate had presumably been well aware of what royal life would entail, including the loss of privacy and the intense public interest in her personal life. Royal biographers and commentators noted that Kate had generally handled media attention very well throughout her time as a working royal, which made the current situation all the more puzzling. Her previous approach to royal duties had been characterized by professionalism and careful adherence to protocol, making the apparent amateur editing mistakes in the Mother's Day photograph seem particularly out of character. The involvement of Kate's family members, particularly her sister Pippa Middleton, in various media controversies over the years, was also brought up by some commentators as evidence that the Middleton family was not naive about media manipulation and public relations. This background knowledge made it even more difficult for some observers to accept that the photograph editing had been the result of innocent amateur mistakes. The broader context of royal media relations also played a significant role in shaping public reaction to the controversy. The relationship between the British royal family and the media has been fraught for decades, with the treatment of Princess Diana being a particular source of ongoing tension and guilt within both the media industry and the royal establishment. The memory of Princess Diana's death in 1997, which many attributed at least partially to aggressive paparazzi pursuit, has heavily influenced how the British media approaches royal coverage. There is a general understanding, sometimes referred to as a deal, whereby the British press exercises restraint in covering certain aspects of royal private life in exchange for access to official events and information. However, this understanding primarily applies to British media outlets. American publications and websites, such as TMZ, operate under no such constraints and have been much more willing to publish potentially intrusive material. This difference in approach became apparent during the Kate Middleton controversy, with American outlets publishing paparazzi photographs that British publications refused to touch. The global nature of modern media meant that this restraint by British outlets was largely ineffective in controlling the narrative. Images and speculation that British publications refused to engage with were still widely available through American and other international sources, creating a situation where British readers had to turn to foreign media to get information about their own royal family. This dynamic highlighted what many critics saw as an increasingly absurd situation, where British media was operating under self-imposed restrictions that were being rendered meaningless by the global nature of digital communication. The argument was made that if the goal was to protect royal privacy, then the current system was failing, while if the goal was to inform the British public about their head of state, then the restrictions were counterproductive. The controversy also raised questions about the effectiveness of traditional royal communication strategies in the digital age. The palace's approach of releasing minimal information and hoping that public interest would fade was being undermined by the ability of social media users to maintain focus on issues indefinitely and to conduct their own investigations and analysis. The technical sophistication of amateur photo analysis, enabled by widely available software and online tutorials, meant that official photographs could no longer be published without the expectation that they would be subjected to forensic examination by thousands of motivated individuals. This represented a fundamental shift in the media landscape that the royal communication team appeared unprepared to handle effectively. The convergence of multiple royal health mysteries created an unprecedented situation for the British monarchy, with both the current king and the future queen facing serious questions about their well-being, while maintaining an unusual level of secrecy about their respective conditions. The parallel crises involving King Charles's undisclosed cancer treatment and Kate Middleton's mysterious surgery and subsequent disappearance from public life painted a picture of a royal institution that seemed increasingly out of step with modern expectations of transparency and accountability. The situation with King Charles added another layer of complexity to the already confusing narrative surrounding royal health disclosures. While the king had taken the relatively progressive step of publicly acknowledging his cancer diagnosis, the complete lack of detail about the type of cancer, the stage of the disease, his treatment plan, or his prognosis left the public with almost as many questions as if no announcement had been made at all. Medical experts and royal commentators noted that this level of vagueness was particularly puzzling, given that cancer treatment and prognosis can vary dramatically depending on the specific type and stage of the disease. The timing of these dual health crises was particularly unfortunate for the monarchy's public image, having both the current monarch and one of the most popular and visible members of the next generation dealing with serious health issues simultaneously created a sense of institutional vulnerability that was unprecedented in recent royal history. The lack of clear information about either situation only heightened public anxiety about the stability and continuity of the royal institution. The absence of any future royal engagements featuring Kate Middleton on the official calendar became an increasingly glaring indication that whatever was happening with the Princess of Wales was more serious or complicated than the palace was willing to acknowledge. Royal calendars are typically planned months in advance, and the complete absence of any scheduled appearances suggested either that Kate's recovery was expected to be much longer than initially indicated, or that there were other factors at play that made public appearances impossible or inadvisable. The stark difference between British and American media coverage of the royal health situations highlighted the increasingly complex and often contradictory nature of modern royal media relations. While British publications continued to exercise traditional restraint in their coverage, American media outlets felt no such obligation and pursued the story with the aggressive investigative approach typically reserved for celebrity scandals. This created a bizarre situation where British citizens often had to turn to foreign news sources to get detailed coverage of their own royal family's activities and controversies. The paparazzi photographs that had been published by TMZ, but avoided by British media, became a particular symbol of this transatlantic divide in coverage approaches. The fact that these images, which purported to show Kate Middleton in a car, were readily available to anyone with internet access while being ignored by British publications, highlighted the increasingly meaningless nature of traditional media restrictions in the digital age. The technical quality of the photo editing in the Mother's Day photograph became a source of particular bewilderment and criticism among professional photographers and digital imaging experts. The errors identified in the image were so obvious and numerous that they suggested either a remarkable lack of skill on the part of whoever had performed the editing, or alternatively, that the editing had been rushed or carried out under pressure, without adequate time for quality control. Professional photo editors and retouchers expressed genuine shock at the poor quality of the manipulation work. In an era where sophisticated photo editing tools are widely available, and where even amateur photographers can achieve convincing results with relatively modest effort and training, the glaring mistakes in an official royal photograph seemed almost inexplicable. Several professional photographers noted that they had staff members with minimal experience who could have produced a more convincing result. The technological capabilities available for photo manipulation in 2024 made the poor quality of the editing even more puzzling. Advanced artificial intelligence tools for photo editing and facial reconstruction had become widely available, making it possible to create highly convincing composite images with relatively little technical expertise. The fact that whoever was responsible for the Mother's Day photograph had apparently chosen to use traditional photo editing techniques and had executed them so poorly suggested either a deliberate choice to avoid more sophisticated tools or a significant lack of awareness about available technology. The emergence of social media influencers and content creators who specialized in royal watching represented a new and significant factor in how royal controversies developed and spread. Platforms like TikTok and Instagram had given rise to a generation of royal commentators who built substantial followings by providing detailed analysis and speculation about royal activities. These creators, some of whom had millions of followers, were able to maintain sustained attention on royal controversies in ways that traditional media could not or would not. The Kate Middleton photograph controversy proved to be a perfect storm for these royal watching influencers, providing them with exactly the kind of mystery and speculation that their audiences craved. The technical nature of the photo editing errors also lent itself well to the detailed investigative content that performed well on social media platforms. Creators were able to produce extensive video content breaking down the specific problems with the image, comparing it to other royal photographs, and speculating about what the editing errors might reveal about the circumstances surrounding the image. The global reach of these social media platforms meant that royal watching content was no longer primarily a British phenomenon. American, Canadian, Australian, and other international audiences became deeply engaged with the controversy, often bringing different perspectives and expectations about royal transparency that differed significantly from traditional British approaches to royal coverage. The sustained attention from social media creators also meant that the controversy had a much longer lifespan than traditional royal news stories. Where previous royal controversies might have faded from public attention within a few days or weeks, the Kate Middleton photograph story continued to generate new content and analysis for weeks after the initial incident. This sustained attention made it much more difficult for the palace to simply wait for public interest to fade, as had been their traditional approach to managing difficult stories. The technical sophistication of amateur photo analysis, enabled by widely available software and online tutorials, represented a fundamental shift in how official images could be scrutinized. The ability of ordinary social media users to conduct detailed forensic analysis of photographs meant that official royal images could no longer be published with the expectation that they would be accepted at face value. This democratization of technical expertise created new challenges for royal communication teams that had not previously had to consider the possibility that their images would be subjected to pixel-level analysis by thousands of motivated individuals. The international nature of the controversy also highlighted the limitations of traditional royal communication strategies that had been developed for a primarily British audience and media landscape. The palace's approach of providing minimal information and relying on the discretion of British media was completely inadequate for managing a story that had global reach and involved media outlets that operated under completely different cultural and professional norms. The failure of the photograph to achieve its intended purpose of reassuring the public about Kate's well-being instead amplified existing concerns and created new questions about the competence and honesty of royal communications. The fact that an official palace photograph had been so heavily manipulated that major news agencies refused to distribute it represented a significant blow to the credibility of royal media relations and raised questions about what other official royal communications might not be entirely truthful. The broader implications of the controversy extended beyond just questions about Kate's health to fundamental issues about the role and relevance of monarchy in the modern world. Critics argued that the level of secrecy and evasiveness displayed during the crisis was indicative of an institution that was fundamentally out of touch with contemporary expectations of transparency and accountability. The contrast between the royal approach to health disclosure and the more open communication strategies employed by other public figures and institutions became a particular point of criticism. Political leaders, celebrities, and other public figures routinely provide detailed information about their health challenges, including specific diagnoses, treatment plans, and recovery timelines. The royal insistence on maintaining secrecy around basic health information seemed increasingly anachronistic and difficult to justify. The financial arguments about royal transparency also gained renewed relevance during the controversy. Critics pointed out that the royal family's lifestyle and activities were ultimately supported by public funding through various mechanisms, which created an obligation for greater openness than they were currently providing. The argument was that individuals who lived in publicly funded palaces and traveled in publicly funded transportation while carrying out publicly funded duties should be held to higher standards of transparency than ordinary private citizens. The conclusion of this analysis reveals a royal institution struggling to adapt to the realities of modern media, digital communication, and public expectations. The Kate Middleton photograph controversy exposed fundamental weaknesses in royal communication strategies and highlighted the growing disconnect between traditional palace approaches to managing public relations and the realities of contemporary media consumption and analysis. The sustained global attention, technical scrutiny, and persistent questions generated by what should have been a simple family photograph demonstrated that the old rules of royal media management were no longer adequate for navigating the complexities of digital age communication and public accountability.